Welcome to day 3. That's right, I said day 3. Woohoo! Yeah, it's worth celebrating. There's a lot of reasons why we should celebrate it, but not the least of which is this is our final day of the fasting part of this whole experience, right? I know, those of you who gave up food, you're really celebrating right now. Here's the thing. Today is a very important part of our process. We began with preparation. Our second day was about our expectation. But today is going to focus in on our cooperation. When we hear God speak to us, and hopefully you wrote down some things that the Lord spoke to you, impressions He put in your heart yesterday and continues to do today, that you're making note of those things. But it's also important that we understand that once we hear, we now have a responsibility. So let's think about that just a little bit. The scripture says in James 1, verses 22 through 25, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does." Jesus said in Matthew 7, verses 24 through 25, "Therefore whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock." One more passage of Scripture, 1 Timothy 1, verses 18 through 20. "This charge I commit to you, son Timothy, according to the prophecies previously made concerning you." In other words, the things that God spoke into Timothy's life, this young pastor that Paul was mentoring. And he says that these prophecies previously made concerning you, that by them you may wage a good warfare, having faith and a good conscience, which some, having rejected concerning the faith, have suffered shipwreck, of whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander. Wow, he names them. Not always great to get your name in the Bible, is it? And then he says, "Who I've turned over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme." Wow. Paul putting a very strong emphasis on the significance of what we do with what God speaks to us. I want you to be encouraged today that as you begin to hear direction and thoughts that God is putting into your heart about His plan, purposes, and will for your life, I want you to recognize these scriptures that we just read and some significant things about them, and that our response matters when God speaks. Here's the first thing you need to realize out of the very first scripture we read. The blessing is in the doing, not the knowing. It's not just knowing what God says that brings about the blessing. It's when we act on what He says. We take that faith step, that next step in obedience to what He's saying. That's where the blessing comes in. Here's a second thing. Obedience gives us stability when we face the challenges that life throws at us. Jesus said, "Whoever hears these words of mine and does them has a house built on the rock." So when rains come and the winds blow, that house stands firm. So when we act and we hear God's voice and we choose to act on them, we're laying a foundation that the challenges of life won't be able to mess with us. And here's the third. It can become a weapon for us to use against doubt and fear and all the things that the enemy might try to do to tell us that what God said won't happen. It's important that we recognize this idea that Paul told Timothy, having faith and a good conscience. Faith means we believe this was God who spoke to us. A good conscience is our willingness to cooperate and do our part. In other words, to obey, to follow through, to not just hear it so we can say, "Hey, I heard something from the Lord." It's about what we do with it and how we respond. You know, our whole church is going to have this experience today. We have services at 10 a.m. and tonight at 7. In fact, we're going to be breaking our fast together with communion during the evening service. But we brought in some people who are some ministers, some people we know, we trust, who are going to minister prophetically in those services over people that we've specifically asked to be candidates, to be prayed over, but also there'll be words shared with people in the congregation. So I hope you will make plans to be there, because some of the things that you've been hearing Monday and Tuesday and today, the Lord may very well, through prophetic ministry, confirm some of those things to you. That's one of the major roles that the prophetic gift plays. I'm so excited for what God is saying, what God is doing during these special Discover services this week, that you today, on the third day, you've been praying, you've been fasting, you've been preparing, you've been expecting, you've been listening, and I can't wait for us to be able to come together this morning and this evening. Hope you can join us in our Discover services.